the Inside Scoop Virginia, all the news Virginians want to know. Now here's the host of Inside Scoop Virginia, George Burke.
Welcome to Inside Scoop Virginia. My guest tonight is Mike Lane. I would suggest he's my favorite Republican consultant. Mike's been around. I think you'll be surprised sometimes at the different positions we take. Mike, welcome to the show.
George, it's a pleasure to be back working with you. Thank you.
And we're going to talk a little politics tonight. Obviously, some of you will watch this after the fact, but we're live tonight, and the presidential primary in New Hampshire is tomorrow. Both Mike and I both have connections to New Hampshire. We both went to college there. I was a reporter there, and I actually came to Washington with a New Hampshire congressman. I go back frequently. I still have some family up there. And so I watch it closely, and I think both of us have a feel for how people vote up there. And let's go right into the presidential stuff. One of the things that struck me the most, Mike, was I haven't actually lived there full-time for over 30 years, about 30 years, 28, 30 years. But I've been back frequently over those years, every year for some period of time. Since 2000, 1/4 of the state's population has moved in since 2000.
The southern part of the state, as you know, you always, every 4 years we talk about the enormous growth of the southern part of the state, and this time again, yet enormous growth in the southern part of the state.
Way back in the days when Warren Rudman was a senator there, and the like, we used to point out that more than 50% of the people were not born there. Well, that number has skyrocketed. It's also become a wealthier state. It's more white collar than it ever was. It used to, at one point, it was the most industrialized state per capita east of the Mississippi. That's not the case anymore. Now it's high tech, it's professional stuff, lots of white collar, higher income level in the state than ever before. So that all has some bearing on the presidential primary. You know, if you'd asked me, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put you on the spot, and I'll go first. So, I'm going to ask you to pick the order you think the Republicans are going to come in New Hampshire. And of course, some people will be watching this after the fact, and you'll be able to see how right we were. And I will pick the Democrats, and then we can go back and forth on whether we agree on our opposing parties. Right off the bat, if you'd asked me a month ago, I would have said Hillary Clinton, no doubt about it.
She was inevitable a month ago.
And she seemed unstoppable. But now everything has changed with Obama's Iowa victory, and at least the polling numbers I'm seeing since Iowa that have been taken in New Hampshire, Obama is just surging up there. And you can tell by the crowds he draws. I got a call from a friend of mine who's working up there right now, and he said 75 people showed up in somebody's living room in Bow, New Hampshire last night to see Obama's wife. That's somebody's living room. That's not these big events you see on TV. This is the real New Hampshire primary stuff where people demand to get a one-on-one with them. So I'll give you my picks right off the bat. I think given the demographic changes in New Hampshire, despite the fact that Hillary has been working that state incessantly for almost a year and a half at least. I mean, I was up there last summer. You couldn't go to a supermarket where there weren't young men or women gathering signatures for Hillary and seeking support and the like. But I'm going to have to say Obama. And I mean, while I personally support Hillary, I can live with either Obama or Hillary in terms of the nominee. I think Hillary's a little more experienced, but Obama certainly has some charisma. I think Edwards will come in third, and I think it'll be a bit of a distant third, and Bill Richardson will come in fourth. The reality of the matter is I could live with any of them as our nominee. Richardson, I think, doesn't get the credit he deserves given the offices he's held and his grasp of many policy issues, but the fact of the matter is he's really out of the ball game. He's staying in and he makes it interesting, but I think we'll see him as a cabinet secretary if the Democrats win the presidency.
Either that or people speculate that he's been all along campaining for the vice presidency.
That could very well be.
That could be, because he, as you point out, he's got the resume that he's basically done everything.
And he also has, he should be able to pull some of the Hispanic vote, although his last name is not a Hispanic last name. He himself has I believe, a Mexican mother, I think is what it is. So where are you at?
Well, on our side, it's a little bit tougher to call because our polls are tightening as of this afternoon.
No doubt, no doubt.
After Iowa, and the surprise to me was not that Huckabee won Iowa, but the margin by which he won it. It was as surprising as the margin by which Obama won Iowa. They were both solid,
about 9 points each. I think,
kicking butt kind of wins. You go to New Hampshire, it's a different kind of state. I don't think Huckabee competes well in New Hampshire.
You don't have the evangelicals.
You don't have them at all. He's not really appealing to anybody. The theory from 4, 3, and 2 days ago, even as much as yesterday or this morning, was that John McCain was going to wind up being the anti-Huckabee, and it was going to be a McCain victory there, knocking Romney out of it, and McCain and Huckabee going on to future. With Huckabee having no particular organization or money, McCain was going to have an easy time to the nomination. Most recently this afternoon, Rasmussen has another poll out that shows McCain is down to only a 1-point lead after having a 6-point lead 3 days ago. So this one's very tight. I'm still going to predict that John McCain's going to win this one. I don't think that Governor Romney is going to be able to pull it back. So I think you'll see McCain, Romney, Huckabee probably is going to be a distant third. Other people are calling him fourth, but I think he'll be a distant third. And then we've got 2 others that Thompson and just aren't doing what they need to get done.
If Huckabee pulls even a distant third, that keeps him in the game because the expectations for him in New Hampshire are very low.
He'll keep in the game anyway because he's got a lot going on in South Carolina, and so no matter if he came in dead last in New Hampshire with the low expectations, he's still going to South Carolina where there's a very substantial organized block of the evangelicals that will support him, and he'll play quite well in South Carolina. Where he goes from there is problematic for him, but he'll stay in the mix for that.
You get into some of the big industrial states and the like. The one who's perplexing to me is Romney. I hate to say this, but if you've seen the Stepford Wives, he reminds me of the Stepford candidate. He's totally programmed. And he's done a 180-degree reversal on many of his issues. I don't want to suggest that some of the Democrats have not also reversed themselves on some issues over time, and certainly they all have records. But his has probably been the most startling. How do the conservatives view? I mean, he's got a very conservative agenda now.
He does.
But his agenda in Massachusetts, which is quite the liberal state, although they do sometimes elect Republican governors, Bill Weld was elected up there as well. What do they think of him?
Well, 2 things. I mean, there's 2 camps on that. There is a significant segment that does not abide Governor Romney and just wonder why he came so late to the party. Where have you been? And you've got a track record, and we don't like what it was. On the other hand, there's what I call the Ann Coulter school of political thought. Not that I'm an Ann Coulter devotee, but
I do like her legs.
But she said, well, she's an attractive woman. She said
on the outside
about 3 months ago when she was going through an interview and she was asked the same question, what about Romney and his flip-flops? And her answer was, well, as long as he's flipping in my direction, I have no problem with it.
Well, we all know it's all about spin, and we all know when we do this show it's about spin.
Right.
We're certainly going to put the best face on our candidates and our issues.
But let's talk about Governor Romney for just a second, and we can get back to your people if you want to. But Governor Romney's problem is he's got a must-win situation going on here, I think.
Yeah,
I mean, his whole strategy was about Iowa and New Hampshire, Iowa and New Hampshire, Iowa and New Hampshire. And when he didn't win Iowa, then he had to do New Hampshire. If he doesn't do New Hampshire, I don't care how close a second he comes in, the whole rationale for his whole strategy is gone. Now, he's going to have the resources. He's not going to go away. He's got $750 million of his own money that he can put into it. He mentioned over the weekend that he had not put a personal limit on how much he was going to put into it, but his wife had, and he declined to disclose what his wife's limit was. But he will still be around, but it's hard to understand where he's going to get another toehold if he can't do it in New Hampshire.
I think the media will put him in the same basket that they've put John Edwards. I mean, I've heard several. I saw Elizabeth Edwards on Chris Matthews the other night, and she was basically, actually I was listening to a podcast. I was blowing leaves that I hadn't gotten out of my backyard. And she was saying to him, when are you going to treat my husband like he's a real candidate? I mean, you guys ignore him.
Right. Well, that's what happens when you're in third place,
Yeah. I tend to agree with you in the order on the Republicans. I think that McCain will pull it out. He's more of a candidate he won it last time up there, and he's a candidate that's going to appeal to him. Quite frankly, I think the candidate the Democrats are most scared of is John McCain.
I would think right now, given where the field is, many experts are saying that he would play best against Obama, presuming that Obama wins tomorrow, and then it's likely that he would be able to run the table from there. I mean, Senator Clinton would clearly have some resources to compete in some of the major industrial states on the 5th of February, but she's not going to be able to raise the money to compete in all the states, and so she's got to pick and choose. And I think from a victory tomorrow, it looks to me like Obama just begins to run the table, and it's hard to figure out where she gets a toehold back.
Do you think that, McCain's had some money problems, obviously, for some time. Do you think if he wins New Hampshire, the money will start flowing?
It's amazing how a win picks those things up. Not that Senator McCain and Governor Huckabee are the same kind of people, because they're not. But if you listen to Governor Huckabee yesterday on one of the Sunday morning talk shows, they asked him, well, what's it been like since you won the Iowa caucus? And he said, well, the biggest thing is we used to do all these fundraisers and we'd get $25,000 a night of the fundraiser. All of a sudden, the last 4 nights we've done fundraisers and we're getting $250,000 a night of the fundraiser. So yes, as soon as you win, the spigot gets turned on, the campaign finance comes in, and you have the resources to compete.
I was sort of just, both of us with our New Hampshire roots that we have up there, I was a little disappointed that the calendar, first of all, it started so early, but that the two events were so close together, because New Hampshire's not making as much money out of the primary this time as they normally do. It's a big economic boost for that state.
Not only is it an economic boost, but it really is a politically prestigious thing for New Hampshire, and I think their prestige is just marginally diminished as a result of following so closely on Iowa's tails.
And I know I'm going to have Iowans who hate me for this, but it's a convoluted process out there. And it just does not, it isn't the same as an election of sorts. And, this thing about second choices, not that New Hampshire people, a lot of them don't wait till the end to decide, but this thing about second choices and moving about the room, and I understand how it works, and it does work. I just don't think that it's as appropriate or as telling as the New Hampshire primary. And I'm being parochial about this.
Well, we could do an entire show as to how the entire nominating system is broken and how it ought to be fixed, and I'm sure we each have our own ideas, and that could be more than a show. It's just, it doesn't work. The disproportional influence that Iowa, as a relatively unrepresentative state,
not that New Hampshire's that much more representative.
Maybe I'm a little parochial. I went to school in New Hampshire, as did you. I did. I'm sure you have the memories, off topic a little bit, of going to school up there and having everybody who was anybody who wanted to be president came onto your campus and sat down and were available to talk to anybody in small groups. I remember in the early 70s talking to George McGovern, just 3 of us, when he came onto the campus, and we were just sitting there chatting with him, and it was a very heady experience for a young college kid.
The first campaign I covered as a reporter, still in school as a senior, we set up a news bureau that fed all the state's media. Remember, there was no CNN and all that stuff then, was George McGovern. We will be back in 2 minutes. I think we could discuss the presidential for an hour, but we want to talk about the Senate race, we want to talk about the 11th Congressional District race, and we want to talk about the General Assembly tonight. So feel free to call us, and thank you for watching.
This is Mommy's bed. Me and Jenny were jumping on it. Mommy's gun fell on the floor. I was a cowboy. Bang, 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 bang. I said, Jenny, wake up, it's just pretend. But she wouldn't wake up. If you give me a fish.
If you give someone a fish,
you feed them for a day.
Teach someone to fish.
You feed them for a lifetime.
Give me a fish, and you'll feed me for a day. Teach me to fish, and you'll feed me for a lifetime.
Through Volunteers of America, you can help change lives in your community.
Oh, hey, mister, studied algebra in school and got a better job than I could. You take the last cup.
Oh, no, mister. Stuck in an entry-level job because you only learned basic math. I don't have a boss riding my butt like you do, so you take it so you can get back to your desk.
You know, I probably should, but maybe Miss AP Calculus with the $200 haircut in the big office upstairs would like a cup.
Oh, no, Mr. What was your name again? Never mind, it doesn't matter. I'm too busy doing important things to care. I just came down for some sweet and stir.
You know, if my limited math abilities weren't keeping me from getting a better job, I'd quit this afternoon.
I don't blame you. But thank goodness you're stuck here because we really need someone to make the coffee.
Line it up, baby. Come on. Line it up, baby. Come on. Line it up, baby.
Now back to the Inside Scoop, Virginia. Call in live and let your voice be heard. Here again, your host, George Burke.
Welcome back. My guest tonight is Mike Lane. He's a Republican consultant. He knows his stuff. Feel free to call us and challenge us at 571-749-1166. We are lucky enough to have a studio audience tonight. That like doubles our viewership, you know.
It's wonderful.
And you had a question. You received a question.
I received a question from the studio, which is, I hadn't really mentioned Rudy Giuliani in the first segment, and where does he fit in, and can he win the Republican nomination? Here's Rudy's problem. He came up with a strategy that has never worked before. There's no model for it. You can't skip everything in the first month and start in Florida and then move to New York and California and start racking up the big states like that. There's too much media momentum that's generated out of the earlier, smaller states. And so his strategy, although it looked good when he was riding high in the polls pre-Iowa, now that he didn't play in Iowa, now that he's not playing in New Hampshire, his national standing has gone down. You know, he still has the chance to win Florida and to win New York and New Jersey and California and things like that. But since it's never been done, I can't predict it's going to happen. I think there are a lot of Republicans who want Rudy Giuliani, even though he's more liberal than the party is, because they think he would be a great candidate to win. They think he would play well in a general election, but he's got to still be around by the time they get a chance to vote for him.
And a law and order guy.
But he's got to still be around, and it just doesn't look like his strategy is going to keep him around long enough. I'd like to be proven wrong on that. I was proven wrong on Obama when I said he wasn't going to be able to bring out as many new people and as many young people as he did. He blew my expectations by about 3,000%. Maybe Rudy will do it as well, but I just don't see it yet.
I have personal issues with Rudy, as do the International Association of Firefighters, that stem from the actions of his administration after 9/11. I'm not going to go into them in detail, although if you go to www.iff.org, there is a video there that sort of breaks his
I suspect anybody who's really interested in politics knows the history between the firefighters and Rudy, and they don't even have to look it up.
Times. You know? And I mean, I was in City Hall for months, in and out of City Hall, and he clearly didn't like me for a variety of reasons. But I just did not find him to be palatable. I mean, I don't want to slander the guy, but I have personal issues about him. You know, you talk about, and then we'll get off presidential because we want to get into local stuff. You talk about the Obama thing. Well, all these kids that came out, when I say kids, I'm talking about under 28, 25 years old.
Right, the youth.
There was like 17% or 18% of the turnout there. There's a young man, his name is James Hanaway, who has been, his father called me and said, what do you think if he takes a year off from college? He's a sophomore at Carleton College in Minnesota, and he'd done some of this stuff for candidates in Minnesota, getting the kids fired up. And I said, I think he'd get a 4-year education in 1 year on a presidential campaign.
Absolutely.
The next thing you know, this kid's all over the country. He's not even old enough to rent a car. He's driving rental cars. He's picking up speeding tickets, trying to get from one place to the next. And for a while, he actually had an office in Obama's headquarters in Chicago overlooking the lake. You know, I have to give that young man some, he's not doing it alone, but he was one of the architects.
I think we'll hear a lot from him over the next several cycles. He sounds like a comer.
I think he'll end up certainly being a consultant. let's move into let's start with the 11th Congressional District. Obviously, you know it well. I know it well. I'm the chair of the committee on the Democratic side. We've had another entry into the race on the Democratic side, or half entry. Connolly has put his toe in the water and formed an exploratory committee, and he's started to raise some money. Of course, Leslie Byrne has been formed an exploratory committee before the election, and as of Election Day, she jumped into the race, and so she's been raising money, and they're both starting to garner endorsements and support, and I think we'll see that draw more to a head in the next month or so, if and when Connolly becomes a formal candidate. And then we have Doug Dinenny. I've actually had Leslie Byrne and Doug Dinenny on this show, and they both have a pretty, Leslie has a strong grasp of policy issues. Dinenny, certain issues right now. I mean, the guy's a Naval Academy graduate and the like, and former flew, jets over Iraq and all of that. And of course, Connolly's known as a policy wonk personified as well as a politician. So I think there's a pretty strong field on the Democratic side. Poor Doug Dinenny's going to have to duck when the fireballs start being thrown from these two very accomplished politicians who I suspect will both have strong campaigns. I mean, I've been inside both of their campaigns in different races, and they both know how to do it. I think that Doug will stay in through the process, and he'll learn a lot, and he'll get his name about for the future. I mean, he's not going to go away, and there'll certainly be other elective offices, but I would certainly put him in third place at this point in our primary. What about your side?
Well, the whole thing on your side is predicated, I assume, on the speculation that Tom Davis may not decide to run for another term.
Well, Leslie Byrne has already said she's in it regardless.
Leslie's Byrne going, and Doug Dinenny's going. The fact that Chairman Connolly has only formed an exploratory committee at this time, I assume means that he's hedging his bet, and he's waiting to see what Congressman Davis does.
Although he can run if he chooses to run, and it's a grueling process running for Congress.
Right.
If he chooses to run, he still has his fallback position as chairman.
Right. He doesn't. Right. But he doesn't have to do that. But I would think that that from my perspective, anyway, if Congressman Davis decides to run one more time, he's still the favorite to hang on to the seat. Now, he's probably going to have a tougher race than he's had.
I would agree with that.
Before, but he's probably the favorite.
Jerry, tougher race.
Jerry Connolly is going to look at that and say, well, do I really want to have a knockdown slugfest with Leslie Byrne? And how much is the nomination worth after we've just killed ourselves? Sort of the same process that Tom Davis went through when looking at the Senate race. Do I want to have a knockdown drag out with Jim Gilmore, and how much is the nomination worth after we've just killed ourselves? So maybe Jerry's, keeping his options open. Maybe he's really going to go. We don't know yet. He's keeping close counsel. I don't know what Tom Davis is going to do. I talked to his people today, and they don't know what he's going to do. He's thinking about this very, very carefully. If my advice to him is that he really, really wants to be in the United States Senate, that his best shot is probably serving 2 more terms in the House and running in 4 years against Jim Webb for the Senate seat, he may decide that he has a different road that he's going to pursue. Should he step down, we've got 3 or 4 candidates who are out there now making a lot of noise about how they'd like to go. There's a guy named Fithian who's raised quite a bit of money. A lot of it is own, but he's raised quite a bit. There's another guy named Dale who's attacking Congressman Davis from the right. There's probably former school board member at large, Steve Hunt, would be looking at this race. And then as far as the big shots are concerned, you've got somebody like Michael Powell, the chairman of the FCC, that may decide to get into it. But as I think it would be leaning Republican if Tom Davis stays, I think it would probably be leaning Democrat if Tom Davis leaves.
I think the demographics have changed dramatically. I mean, when it was redistricted, it was still a Republican seat. They took Bailey's out in some of those areas. And
put them in the 8th.
Yeah, which is just a hotbed of Democratic politics. But the 11th isn't going to, unless they radically redistrict it, the 11th is going to continue to move towards the Democrats. There's no doubt about it.
It's a problematic demographic that's growing there.
And they can only do so much, or they're going to start jeopardizing the 10th in redistricting. I think that, I've talked extensively with Leslie and with Jerry, and they both talk about wanting to have a race on the issues. But as well as I do, you get into a primary fight, it can be a knockdown, drag-out Duke fest.
I can say something that you probably can't, and that is that former Congresswoman, former Senator, former Secretary, former everything Leslie Byrne, although exceptionally qualified on the issues, articulate and everything else, she has a campaign history of really going to the mat.
Oh, and she plays hardball.
It's going to be tough to keep. It's going to be tough to keep the mud out of that race if it goes that way.
And Connolly as well. Connolly's plays hardball too. It's going to be very interesting. I am happy as the 11th District Chair that I remain neutral. We've already voted as a committee. We make the decision that we will have a primary on the Democratic side. And so we'll leave it to the electorate and leave it to the state to hold the primary. So we'll just sort of duck for cover until after the primary and then work for whomever the nominee is. But I think it's going to be interesting. In terms of Tom Davis, it's not a lot of fun in the House of Representatives being in the minority.
I'm sure he's having less fun this year than he had last year, without a doubt.
And, we've talked about this before. Chris Shays says he wants that ranking minority member seat. And, Tom has spent most of his life in public service and, has never gone out and made the big bucks. He certainly has proved he can raise the big bucks. And he's, he's always been a very prolific fundraiser when he was with the Congressional Campaign Committee of Republicans and for himself. And we saw for his wife as well. But at some point, he may want to go out and make some money. I told him when I saw him last time, I said, Tom, you're not getting any younger. The longer you're in the minority, the less you're worth. You get out there and make some money.
The recent election has given his wife the opportunity to go out and make all the money now. So I don't know. Tom is dedicated and committed to public service. He spent a lifetime doing it. He started off as Mason District Supervisor and worked his way up. He'd like to continue that public service. The question is, are the opportunities available, what really appeals to him, or is he going to accept one of those other opportunities?
I'll say something that you can't say, that the strongest, and we'll get into this, we're going to talk about the Senate race when we come back from our break, but I'll leave you with this thought. Tom Davis probably would have been the strongest Republican candidate against Mark Warner. And now you have two other candidates who tend to be a lot alike.
And now we have a Senate primary or a Senate convention thing in the Republican Party. We'll talk about that after the break.
Our number here is 571-749-1166. We encourage you to call if you want to give us a hard time. And we will be back in 2 minutes after this break. Thanks for watching.
Some people in Fairfax County don't know what public access means.
Some think it's just another channel on the dial.
But it's much more than that.
It's the voice of the people.
People like you.
Your neighbors,
your friends,
or your family.
People who want to share ideas,
opinions,
cultures, lifestyles,
art,
sports, music,
events,
entertainment,
history,
science,
beliefs.
People who want to learn about television,
producing,
directing,
cameras, audio,
lighting,
editing, or radio, talk, music.
Whatever you think people should hear.
Public access is the place where everyone has a voice.
And it's the place where that voice gets heard.
A place where you can create your own form of personal expression.
So what do you want to say?
Whatever it is,
you can say it here.
Because we're public access.
For the people,
by the people.
It is about balancing our choices between the gray of the concrete jungle and the stunning beauty of the real one, between a stoic facade of granite and the fury of the canyon. It's why there's EarthShare, the simple way to find balance. EarthShare is the workplace giving program bringing the leading environmental groups under one umbrella. Support EarthShare, support them all. EarthShare. Please ask your employer about workplace giving. To learn more, visit our website.
Thousands of kids in this country have everything it takes to go to college, except the money. The United Negro College Fund. A mind is a terrible thing to waste.
Now back to the Inside Scoop, Virginia. Call in live and let your voice be heard. Here again, your host, George Burke.
Welcome back. My guest is Mike Lane, who's a Republican consultant. We have a good time when we start. Well, I know we're going to talk about General Assembly, but we get into politics so much we like to talk about the horse race. Let's go into the Senate a little bit. I was tickled pink to see Bob Marshall enter the race on the Republican side with Jim Gilmore. We're still clean on our side with just Mark Warner. You never know. You could get some wacko who could jump in. It's a public process. But I don't think you're going to see any other Democrat who's affiliated with the party getting involved in that race. You know, our view is that Mark's got it. Mark's a strong vote getter. Mark appeals across the state, and he'll run a picture-perfect campaign. He's got many of those operatives working for him now who've worked in Virginia for a long time. He's got near unanimous support, if not unanimous support of the party. And we're not taking anything for granted, but we're relatively confident that we may, for the first time in many, many years, have two Democrats in the U.S. Senate.
Well, you know, clearly he is going to be your nominee. There may be some foolish gadfly who gets in there, but ultimately Mark Warner has an easy path to the nomination.
Correct.
And is probably, at this point, the favorite in the general election. Because right now, Tom Davis passed on the Senate race because he didn't think that a knockdown, drag-out convention nomination fight was going to give someone a nomination that would allow them to recover in time to face the general election. Now, as you point out, after former Governor Gilmore having the field essentially to himself for a couple of months and having really laid the groundwork for the last 6 months, now Delegate Bob Marshall of Manassas has decided that he's going to do what I pretty much thought was the undoable. He's actually going to attack Jim Gilmore from the right, which was, to get to the right of Jim Gilmore is a slick trick, and Bob Marshall's going to manage to be able to do it. So we'll see how that comes out. I suspect that Jim Gilmore is going to dispense with Delegate Marshall relatively easily in the convention. However, it's going to keep Gilmore focused on the Republican nomination until the last weekend in May, when he should be out there around the Commonwealth, campaigning for the whole thing. It's not a good thing for our chances from a tactical standpoint.
Gilmore did not make a tremendous splash as a presidential candidate. He had fundraising problems, he had organizational problems, and the like. Is he going to be able to fix those things? Is he going to have a different team? Is he bringing his presidential team in? What do you think he's going to do?
Well, I think one of the problems was he didn't really have a presidential team because he had 2 or 3 guys, and he just didn't raise the money. He didn't catch fire, and he didn't do what needed to be done on the national scene. Now, give Jim Gilmore credit. He's the only one in virtually both parties who last summer realized he was going no place and decided to drop it rather than limp into the first round of primaries and wind up, I think, Duncan Hunter got 500 votes in Iowa, and, et cetera. Dennis Kucinich, might have gotten less than that. So
Chris Dodd, who I love, but
Chris
just
Dodd,
didn't catch fire.
So Jim Gilmore saw the handwriting on the wall. He had enough sense to get out and come back to Virginia. He's been putting his Virginia campaign together since last July. He's got a fairly good organization. This Bob Marshall challenge should be something of an annoying blip, but annoyance nonetheless. I
hear the word annoyance a lot with Bob Marshall, to tell you the truth, from both sides.
Bob's a good, solid Republican. He's got a great voting record. What he doesn't have is a demeanor that appeals to anything other than the purebred conservative.
Well, you have your ultra-conservatives, we have our ultra-liberals on our side, too. I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, we run into some of those same issues with somebody who's far to the left.
So ultimately, although Mark Warner's probably, 25, 30 points up in the polls now, those are preliminary numbers and things like that. Ultimately, this race is going to tighten quite a bit, as all races do. Jim Gilmore will put an organization together. He's doing that now. He will raise the money. He's putting that together now. A betting person, if they were betting now, would probably still bet on Mark Warner, but anything can happen.
Absolutely.
George
In fact,
Allen,
I'll bet you $10 right now on Mark Warner.
I'm not going to do that. George Allen was a mortal lock.
There you go, folks.
4 months
Now you
before
know.
the election, George Allen was a mortal lock. You know, you could have bet the house on it and lost.
I had the privilege of doing 2 trips with Governor Warner to New Hampshire when he was testing the waters as a potential presidential candidate. And even there, he had a crackerjack operation. There's a few of the same people involved, but he's been building his organization for some time. And it's a quality, I'll tell you, my glimpses into the Senate campaign, it's a quality organization. Yeah. He does things right. He tries not to make mistakes, and they look at all sides of something as they move forward. And when I was in New Hampshire with him twice, because obviously that's what I know besides Virginia, there were prominent Democrats who were very much enamored by Mark Warner at that point. You know, for various reasons, he opted. He still has some, kids who are teenagers and the like. And I think he had a feel of how grueling that race would be. But I think he's fully prepared to mount an out-and-out challenge. I mean, Labor Day and other times during the General Assembly campaign, he was all over the place. He was barnstorming the state for those candidates, and certainly it had a double role. Number one, he was helping candidates because he does lift candidates, but he was also getting himself around again and reminding people as to who he was and that he has support from across the state. And that's what Mark Warner has that it's sometimes hard to find in some of the other Democrats we have. He's across the state, has pretty good support.
And he was earning chits at the same time for doing that as well. So in case this annoyance came out of the woodwork, he would still have 99% of the operation pulling for him, which is, always a good thing. If you are looking at a general election and you can avoid the nomination fight, it's always a good thing.
So you'll certainly be on this show again, and I'll offer you the bet again next time and see if you want to make it then. General Assembly starts meeting on Wednesday. Many of the committees are already having, some discussions and the like, and I understand there's over 600 bills that have already been introduced by Republicans and Democrats. As you know, most of them will end up in the trash heap. They'll be killed in subcommittee. We just got word from several sources that they're probably not going to change the subcommittee rules, so subcommittee votes will not be recorded. And that's how they've done business for a while, so that's how it's going to be done. More importantly is when it gets to the full, we'll see what gets to the full committee level. There are a lot of people who suggest by not having recorded subcommittee votes, they're able to get rid of certainly what I would view as some good legislation, but they're able to throw away a lot of bad legislation.
And do it quickly.
Yeah, and without embarrassing the sponsors and the like, it just sort of disappears. There's a lot of stuff on the table. We've talked about immigration before. But, I'm not sure how much we're going to... Last time there were a whole bunch of immigration bills that were brought before the General Assembly, and most of them did not pass. Granted, the Republicans did a good job this time of making that, with the message of immigration and how the problems that are perceived that it is causing and the like. It didn't play particularly well in Fairfax, but it played strongly in Prince William. It played in other jurisdictions, and I personally think part of it was they were test marketing the message for this year. Around the country, and I think that it is going to have some legs, and there's going to have to be some addressing, but it continues to deal with what I believe is the fundamental problem. Neither Democratic administrations nor Republican administrations have been able to take the necessary steps that must be taken at the federal level, and as a result, you've got states having to cope with issues that really are not within their purview.
It's going to be problematic to get anything big on immigration out of the General Assembly and through the governor's desk. When you had the prospect of the Republicans maintaining control of the Senate, there was the likelihood that the House and the Senate could work together, produce something which probably would have been vetoed by the governor. We don't know exactly, depending on what was in it. But when the Senate flipped and went Democratic, there's relatively little likelihood that Senator Saslaw is going to let anything dramatic come up for a vote in the Senate. And so it really looks to me like it's going to be nibbling around the edges again rather than anything that's going to be substantive.
If it's interesting, when you talk to Saslaw, And you ask him, how's the Senate going to change? He says it's not going to change very much. Now, granted, there's been a couple of moderate Republicans who retired and a couple of more conservative Republicans who've taken, in several cases, who've taken their seats. And the Democrats do have a slim majority, but he said, he's told me he's committed. He believes it'll still sort of operate from the center, is how he views it. And that Republicans will have their say on the, as normally occurs in the Senate, as it occurs in the U.S. Senate as well. And I think he wants to maintain a level of comity with a T, C-O-M-I-T-Y, within that body. And I hope that he does.
I think the level of comity within the Senate is likely to hold. It might diminish somewhat. I mean, anytime you've got to change your power, there's a little bit of flexing of feathers on one side.
And we got a lot of new committee chairs.
A lot of new committee chairs. Where I
From
don't,
Northern Virginia.
Where I don't see comedy happening is Senator Saslaw never got along with the House to start with, and I think even more so is not going to get along with the House.
We saw him at a breakfast yesterday. The Fairfax County Democratic Committee had a Road to Richmond breakfast, a brunch, and most of the Democratic delegates and senators were there, and Brian Moran and Saslaw both spoke. And Saslaw noted he had been in communication with Hal, that they have been talking, but we'll see how long that lasts.
By carrier pigeon at best,
Non-smoking. The governor has a proposal out there to prohibit smoking in restaurants. I presume that means bars too. I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, I think bars, restaurants, same definition.
Same as what Maryland has done and what D.C. has done, what New York City has done, what Boston has done. But Virginia is a tobacco state, not like it used to be. Do you think it'll get through the legislature?
I do think it's going to get through this year. Well, I don't know. The House still is going to be the sticking point on it. Let me say, personally, I don't see the need for it. I would love to see a marketing campaign with all the no-smoking restaurants around the Commonwealth or around a community, every non-smoking restaurant in Fairfax, put themselves up in a website, call it no smoking restaurants or whatever it is, and promote themselves to the public as the place to go for a non-smoking meal or non-smoking entertainment, non-smoking anything, and let those who choose to, let tobacco be used, be going. I think you'd see, probably with an aggressive ad campaign like that, you'd probably see 60–70% of restaurants go non-smoking over a concerted period of 5 years. There's no need for the government to step in and be heavy-handed about it. I suspect they'll try. The problem will be in the House, where there's a more libertarian point of view on the whole thing. But it's going to be, without a doubt, one of the top 5 issues that we face down in Richmond this time.
It breezed through. I mean, there was a lot of lobbying by the restaurant groups in some of the other states, but it breezed through. But most of those other states, other than Maryland has some tobacco in their economy, but they don't have quite the history that we have. So we'll see. It'll be interesting. It'll be more of an issue that is. It'll be demagogued a lot.
It's an easy one to demagogue. There's a lot of emotion on all sides of this whole thing. I think the biggest fights I have with my own sister are over smoking in restaurants and things like that. And you know what? She chooses to go to a non-smoking restaurant every place. So anytime I go out with my sister, it's a non-smoking restaurant. They're earning money by being non-smoking.
When I was a big smoker, I owned a bar actually that certainly allowed smoking back almost 30 years ago. But I liked it where you could smoke in the bars and not in the restaurants. That was a nice one. We will be back in 2 minutes, and we'll continue to talk about some of the legislation that's coming before the General Assembly. So we welcome your input, and thanks for watching.
This is Mommy's bed. Me and Jenny were jumping on it. Mommy's gun fell on the floor. I was a cowboy. Bang, 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 bang. I said, Jenny, wake up, it's just pretend. But she wouldn't wake up.
If you give me a fish.
If you give someone a fish,
You feed them for a day.
Teach someone to fish.
You feed them for a lifetime.
Give me a fish, and you'll feed me for a day. Teach me to fish, and you'll feed me for a lifetime.
Through Volunteers of America, you can help change lives in your community.
Oh, hey, mister, studied algebra in school and got a better job than I could. You take the last couple.
Oh, no, mister. Stuck in an entry-level job because you only learn basic math. I don't have a boss riding my butt like you do, so you take it so you can get back to your desk.
You know, I probably should, but maybe Miss AP Calculus with the $200 haircut in the big office upstairs would like a cup.
Oh no, Mr. What was your name again? Never mind, it doesn't matter. I'm too busy doing important things to care. I just came down for some sweet and start.
You know, if my limited math abilities weren't keeping me from getting a better job, I'd quit this afternoon.
I don't blame you. But thank goodness you're stuck here because we really need someone to make the coffee.
Line it up, baby. Come on. Line it up, baby. Come on. Line it up, baby.
Now back to the Inside Scoop, Virginia. Call in live and let your voice be heard. Here again, your host, George Burke.
One of these times, I'm going to fool Mike, and one of our PSAs will be a campaign ad for a Democrat. I'll wait until we get into the heavy state races.
I've had it done before. It's no problem.
The governor is submitting. Virginia's system is a little weird. The governor serves 2 years in office before he basically gets to present his own budget.
Correct.
And then he presents a second budget, which the next governor has to live with. And of course, Tim Kaine has been living with the Mark Warner budget, and this will be his first budget. It comes at a time where the economy is a little shaky, not necessarily here in Virginia, but nationwide. It comes with the housing and unemployment's taken a little blip. It's still only 5%, but it's taken a little blip. Manufacturing, some of the corporations aren't showing quite the returns that were expected by investors in Wall Street. So there may not be the money that he needs to aggressively pursue the programs that are part of his agenda. I mean, he's already scaled back a little bit on the whole pre-K education thing because the money's just not there. They have a mental health piece where they need more money than they can actually find at this point to fund it. And so certainly there are Democrats, and I suspect a few Republicans, but certainly a lot of Democrats who are suggesting take a bite out of the rainy day fund, and they're talking in the vein of $200 million or so, and I think there's about $600 or $800 million in that fund at this point. And from my perspective, it's a rainy day. And, we got to give the governor an opportunity to promote this budget. And the non-smoking thing is in there, but there are a lot of elements to the budget that I don't think we have time to discuss in the last 12, 13 minutes of our show.
Well, George, it wouldn't be a show if I pointed out that it wasn't raining today. It's not going to rain tomorrow, and it's not going to rain the day after. So we don't have a rainy day. The reason we have the budgetary problems, or most of the reason that we have the budgetary problems, is because it was bad estimating last year. We were overly confident into what was going to come in. It didn't come in, and so now the question is, do we attack the rainy day fund, or do we scale back on our ideas? And you point out correctly that the government has scaled back a little bit on his pre-K. He may have to scale back a little bit more, or it may not survive. We don't know that yet.
Correct. That's up to the General Assembly.
I do think there's going to be more money put into mental health at the end of the day. It's just too important at this point in the wake of the Virginia Tech tragedy that no one wants to come home from this session without doing something about mental health. So that will be there. But the other big decision they have to make, in addition to how much do they, if at all, raid the rainy day fund, is how much, if at all, do they siphon off transportation now to fund current projects, because all the money being raised for transportation cannot be spent in this year. It's just physically impossible And so therefore the governor said, well, rather than just let it sit there, let's spend it over here and we'll pay it back later. Well, that's a wonderful thing, except the General Assembly and the governor have been promising that to Virginia for the last 50 years, and they've not once ever kept their promise on the whole thing. Now, I'm not going to hold Governor Kane guilty for everything that his predecessors for the last 50 years have done, but the track record is not good, and the General Assembly is very unlikely to ever pay it back. So now that we have all this money that we finally just raised last year for transportation, including the abusive driver fees, which we'll get to in a second. Now the question is, do we give it to pre-K and other things and hope that the General Assembly eventually gets to paying back the transportation fund, or do we say, I've been down that road many times? I suspect the Republicans are going to be almost unified in saying, no, we're not going to go down that road.
Speaking of transportation, I think that there's now universal agreement, almost universal agreement, that these abuser fees are not working. They certainly haven't cut DUIs, they haven't cut reckless driving, they haven't cut deaths in Virginia, and it hasn't raised as much money.
And it hasn't raised the money, right? That's the key.
I'm still a big proponent that let's just add a couple of cents to the gas tax. I mean, the prices are fluctuating by 15. I mean, I'm paying 15 cents more now than I was paying a couple of weeks ago for gas. Right. And it's not going to go down. It's going to continue to go up. And a couple of pennies are really not going to make a difference in somebody's pocketbook, but they're sure as hell going to make a difference in terms of filling the money we need for transportation. And it really is nothing more than a user fee, just as these transportation fees were viewed. But everyone, truckers pay more because they're driving more miles, using more gas. People with big cars that eat a lot of gas are paying more because they have big cars that use more gas. And it's a way to equitably fund this.
Well, here's the key on transportation.
Mike from Centerville will be with you in a minute. We just want to let us get through this one thought.
Here's the key on transportation, I think. When you call it a gas tax, it becomes a tax, not a user fee.
Correct, yes.
And you're unlikely to get the House to go along
Correct.
with it. I do think that the abuser fees are going to be repealed. I mean, there are a few lone soldiers who are still standing up for them.
They're going to start charging everybody, then you get to the constitutional.
It's probably not going to work. But ultimately, it was a $1.5 billion transportation package, of which $65 million was in abuser fees. To me, the first step ought to be not how can you replace that $65 million. You know, it's just like, okay, it doesn't need to be $1.5 billion. It can be $1.435 billion, and just get rid of the $65 million.
But it really needs to be about $3 or $4 billion. We know that.
But the $65 million is just not that big important in the grand scheme of things.
But it is, from a political perspective, it's become the big political
They're
football.
gone. Yeah. They are gone.
Yeah. Mike from Centerville, welcome to the show. What's your question?
I'm going to continue your transportation topic. Are they going to ever release the private agreements to expand HOV on the Beltway and rail to Dulles? Those are private agreements, and as a voter and as a citizen and as a taxpayer, I can't see them. This is not public disclosure. I have no idea what's in those bills or laws. I
am not going to defend either because I don't feel I have quite enough of a base for it, but I will say about these the so-called Lexus lanes, the HOV lanes where you pay extra to go on. I was listening to a report just today, and it's used a number of places around the world, one of those places being Singapore. Singapore is the only major city in Asia that doesn't have absolute traffic congestion. Absolute traffic congestion. You know what it's like in Asia.
Right.
And what it does, if some poor guy lives 2 hours away by a commute and he can cut that commute by an hour by getting onto one of these lanes, I'll tell you what, that's a powerful incentive
You're willing
to pay a few bucks.
You're willing to pay for that kind of convenience.
You know, some people choose to buy a direct flight rather than buying a flight that goes through a couple of hubs. It costs them more, but it gets them there quicker. I think it's the same thing.
Right. Mike, let me ask you a question if you're still there.
He's gone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think my interpretation, he was talking about the sole source negotiated contracts on those things. And again, I'm not going to defend them either. Like you, it was.
Well, we know who started it.
Well, you know, I
think his name began with Gilmore.
Is no Jim. You know, there are times when that really works. There are times when maybe it doesn't work. In this case, we don't know whether it works or not because we don't know what's in them because they're privately negotiated contracts, and so perhaps some sort of sunshine on that. Without necessarily getting rid of the program would give us an idea as to whether or not it worked.
In terms of, I had some experience with the Rail to Dulles project, and you know, basically it was a federal program that allowed it to be handled this way. I don't think any of us liked the fact that it was a sole source contract. I don't think any of us liked the fact that it's sort of bathed in secrecy. But it's the way it is, and unless you want to scuttle the whole thing and start from scratch again, you got to live with what you got.
And it still may be scuttled because the feds are still dithering over whether or not they're going to declare it fit for federal funds.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if you go way back, you know, Governor Kane would have preferred the tunnel.
Right.
This is ultimately this. If the tunnel was in this mix, it'd be less talk about the sole source. But, you know, the fact of the matter is the congressional delegation, and certainly Tom Davis was part of it, but so was Jim Moran, they came down and said, listen, you know, the Federal Highway Administration ain't going to let this, or the Federal, whatever it's called.
The Federal Highway Administration, I think.
No, it's the FTA, Federal Transit Administration.
Sorry, Federal Transit Administration, right.
You know, basically is not going to let this happen if you start messing with this project. It's either got to be what it is or it's not going to happen. And
it still may not happen.
And it still may not happen.
So we'll find out.
We're running out of time. We talked about mental health. Oh, let's talk just briefly about there's a gun bill out there to prohibit guns on campus. There's another one to prohibit private people who deal at gun shows from selling guns without doing a background check. Otherwise, people have to go through a background check now. What do you think is going to happen to those with the Republicans?
Oh, probably nothing. I don't think you're going to see any of this stuff get through the House. Let me say, my personal perspective is I think there's a 50% solution on the gun show situation. Why not have, instead of, you know, everybody bringing their own checks, you know, system for checks, the way gun dealers have it in their, why not have the gun show sponsors provide that, where every one of the people, for essentially maybe $10 a transaction, could have these background checks done instantaneously, and it would be one source on the gun show floor. And it would work perfect. I mean, you know what? There's a lot of people out there who have not been to gun shows. I've been to many gun shows. You know what? They're not scary places. They're really nice people. You know,
they are scary to some of us liberal Democrats.
They're not scary places. I mean, you know, these are a lot of them are collector's items. A lot of them are Target and sport things like that. I mean, you can go sometime, and they're in this area. They're at the Dulles Convention Center out at or Expo Center out on Route 28, and you know, go sometime and take a look at it.
The fact of the matter is that we sometimes lose touch of the fact here in Northern Virginia
it's
that
the
much of the rest of the state is different.
All the news Virginians want to.
You guys missed it again.
We are closing this show. They closed a little early on us, but we'll close it now. Mike, thank you very much for being here today.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
We could do this for hours. We should have a 5-hour show. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.